Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The steak was cold. Not room temperature, cold. I'd been cutting the same piece for 20 minutes, pretending to be invested in a conversation I wasn't part of. That was the fourth time Declan touched her back. He was wearing one of those navy suits that look black until the light hits them just right. His voice boomed louder than the event's mic system. People listened when he spoke. They laughed before he even finished a joke. And my wife? She looked like she was in the front row of a Broadway show. He leaned into her again, whispering something that made her tilt her head back and laugh. Not a polite chuckle. A genuine, jaw-dropped, eyes-shut laugh. The one I hadn't seen in weeks. Maybe months. I reached for my water, knocking the butter dish off the table. It shattered. No one noticed. I looked down at the tiny mess at my feet and stayed there for a second longer than I needed to, just to breathe. How did I end up here? Ignored at my wife's celebration dinner, surrounded by executives who spoke in acronyms and exchanged six-figure grins. I wasn't even on the guest list. Darla added me last minute. The waiter came by and muttered, "You want the dessert menu?" I said no, but I took a napkin. Not to wipe my hands. Not to clean the floor. I wrote something. 2 sentences. 12 words. I folded it in half, creased it sharp, and slipped it under my untouched steak. Then I stood up and walked out. Past the dessert trays, past the coat check, past 2 interns fake laughing in the hallway. I didn't say goodbye. Not to Darla. Not to anyone. I went home. 3 hours later, my phone exploded. It wasn't a message from her. It was from him. And that's when I knew my move worked. I didn't check my phone right away. I just sat on the couch, jacket still on, staring at the blinking microwave clock. The napkin sat in my mind like a loaded trap. I didn't write anything explosive, nothing that would ruin reputations or get anyone fired. It was subtle, sharp, personal. The kind of sentence that could only come from someone who'd watched everything, remembered everything, and chose silence until it mattered. When my phone finally buzzed at 1:03 a.m., I already knew it was him. Declan. His message was short. What is this supposed to mean? No greeting. No signature. Just that. I didn't answer. I wanted him to sit with it. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt. Confused, unsettled, powerless. 15 minutes later, another message arrived. Did you say something to her? Followed by, you think you're clever? And then finally, we need to talk. That one made me laugh, actually. We? Since when had we become a we? I pictured him in his sleek apartment, pacing around in socks, holding the napkin in one hand and his perfectly styled hair in the other, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't. And he knew it. The next morning, Darla stormed through the front door. Her lipstick was gone, and her heels were in her hand. "Where the hell did you go?" she asked, voice sharp, eyes wild. I didn't answer. I simply pointed to the folded copy of the napkin I had left on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "You left this under your dinner?" "Yup," I said quietly. "What does it mean?" she whispered, her face pale. I looked her dead in the eye. "You tell me, Darla." You laughed before he finished the joke. She froze. No denial. No quick lie. Just stillness. That was the moment I knew she'd read more than just ink on a napkin. She had read herself in it. And that was exactly what I intended. She sat down at the kitchen island like her legs couldn't hold her weight anymore. The folded napkin still trembled in her hand, the crease barely holding together where she'd clenched it too tightly. I watched her eyes flicker across the words again, even though she'd already read them. I didn't need to look at it to remember what I wrote. The things we laugh at reveal what we hide best. 12 words. But the way she was unraveling in front of me, you'd think I'd detonated a bomb. "That doesn't mean anything," she muttered. "You're being dramatic, Linwood." The way she said my name, sharp and irritated, was how you talk to a child who spilled juice on new carpet. But I didn't bite. I just stood there, still in last night's clothes, waiting. She didn't make it 10 seconds. "Are you seriously going to make this into a thing?" she snapped. "He's my coworker. That's it. It was harmless fun." "I didn't ask," I said. "You're defending something I never accused you of." She blinked, thrown off. People like Darla weren't used to being caught off guard. She thrived in debates, deflections, fast-talking herself out of things. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Silence made her nervous. My silence made her paranoid. "You think something's going on?" she asked, her voice cracking just a bit. "Do you?" I replied. That did it. Something broke in her eyes, a tiny flicker of guilt or maybe fear, and she looked away, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the counter that didn't exist. That silence between us stretched until the refrigerator made a sound, and she flinched. "He kissed me once," she said quickly, as if speed would soften the words. "Months ago, and it didn't mean anything." I told him to stop, but she didn't say it with anger. No outrage. No disgust. Just exhaustion. Like she'd been waiting to let that truth out for weeks, and didn't even care how it landed. I nodded, still not saying much. The funny thing was, I already knew. I just didn't expect her to admit it this soon. She didn't cry. That's what stuck with me most. Not the confession. Not the way she said it so flatly, like she was reading a weather report. But the fact that her eyes stayed dry, and she crossed her arms like I had done something wrong. I waited for remorse. A crack in her voice. Maybe even one of those desperate apologies people give when they realize they've gone too far. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Look, if you're going to walk away over one stupid moment, maybe you never really saw me." That sentence should have made me angry. It should have set me off. But it didn't. It just made everything quiet inside. "He kissed you once," I repeated. But something tells me that wasn't the whole story. She didn't answer, but her hand slid the napkin across the counter, avoiding my gaze. That tiny move told me everything. She thought she was in control again. That if she kept the details blurry, I'd eventually shrug it off. But I had already passed the point of needing her version of the truth. I opened the drawer beside me, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it next to her. She didn't touch it. "What's this?" she asked. "Receipts," I said. "Phone logs. Screenshots." I didn't want to believe it. "But Declan made a mistake last week. He messaged you while you were in the shower. Your phone lit up. I wasn't even snooping. It just happened." Her posture stiffened, like a cat cornered. "You went through my stuff? You handed me your phone when you asked me to plug it in," I replied. "I didn't go looking for anything. It found me." I watched her fingers tremble, then tighten into fists. "It wasn't just once, was it?" I asked again. Her eyes darted toward the envelope, then to the fridge, then the floor. "Anywhere but me." "It didn't mean anything," she whispered. "It was just stupid moments. He made me feel seen." That was the line that finally did it. Not the betrayal, not the lies, but that she had the nerve to say he made her feel seen. As if I'd been invisible for years while I stood right in front of her, trying to be enough. And in that moment, I knew I would never be invisible again. She stood there gripping the envelope like it might burn through her fingers. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. That's what rattled her most, the quiet. I could tell. Darla had always been the loud one in every argument, every misunderstanding. But now that the floor was mine, she suddenly wanted the silence to stop. "So what now?" she asked, almost sarcastically, as if I was being unreasonable for not clapping her on the back and saying, "It's okay, babe. Everyone cheats a little." I turned around, walked to the coat closet, and pulled out a second envelope. She froze. "What's that?" she asked, her tone clipped, the panic seeping into her words now. "A copy," I said, "of everything, just in case the first one mysteriously vanished." She stepped back. "Why would you do that?" "Because you weren't going to tell me the truth," I said. "I gave you the chance. You used it to minimize everything. A kiss. A moment. Then you told me it happened more than once. But I already knew that." Her face paled. She glanced at the dining room window like someone might be watching. "Why are you acting like I'm the enemy here?" she snapped. "Because you've been lying in my house," I said. "In our bed. And worst of all, you weren't even good at hiding it." That hit her. I could see it in the slight twitch of her jaw. She prided herself on control, secrecy, precision. The fact that I unraveled her story without yelling, without threatening, without even leaving the house, it unbalanced her. "Where did you get all this?" she demanded. I smiled for the first time in days. "Declan's ex-girlfriend. Turns out, I'm not the only one who was being lied to." Darla looked like she'd been slapped. "You talked to her?" "She reached out to me," I said. "Apparently, he was careless, and she had access to all the receipts you thought were hidden." Darla's voice cracked. "What did she give you?" I leaned closer. Enough to know this wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. I let the words hang, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw Darla genuinely afraid, not of punishment, but of being found out by someone she thought would never catch up. The strange thing about silence is that once it starts, it becomes louder than anything else in the room. Darla stopped asking questions. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't even try to grab the second envelope. She just stood there, like a statue of someone trying to remember which version of themselves to become next. I left the envelopes on the counter and walked past her without saying another word. That same night, I did something unexpected. I showed up at her company's quarterly meeting, the one where partners gave motivational speeches and toasted to vision alignment, like it actually meant something. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I still had the guest badge from the gala. Same suit, same shoes. But this time, I didn't wear the mask of the nervous husband trying to fit in. I walked in like I had nothing left to lose, because I didn't. They were just wrapping up awards when I slipped in through the side door. Darla hadn't seen me yet. Neither had Declan. He was on stage, again. The man loved a microphone, like most people love oxygen. "It's not just about numbers," he said, voice full of self-importance. "It's about trust, about loyalty to the people who build alongside us." That was my cue. I raised my hand like I was about to ask a question, but instead, I walked toward the front. Calm, steady. The room went still. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, loud enough to cut through the applause. "I just wanted to take a second to thank everyone here, especially Declan." There were confused glances, nervous laughter. Even Darla's smile froze in mid-expression. See, Declan reminded me of something very important, that who we are in private eventually leaks into who we are in public. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't name names. But I pulled a single photo from my pocket, one I had printed that morning. I held it up. It wasn't graphic, just clear enough to be understood. Declan's hand on Darla's waist. His face a little too close. Her smile a little too comfortable. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I just said, "You should all be careful who you trust with your brand." Then I turned around and walked out, not just from the meeting, but from the man I used to be. I didn't wait to see how it ended. I didn't watch the reactions or hang around for security to usher me out. I walked straight past the valet, around the corner, and sat in my car for 45 minutes with the engine off, just staring at my hands. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel clever. I felt numb, like my body hadn't caught up with what I'd just done. But somewhere in that stillness, a quiet part of me whispered, "You finally stood up." That night, she didn't come home. I didn't expect her to. But the next morning, when the garage opened and I heard her heels click across the floor, I stayed in the kitchen and waited. Her face was pale, makeup smudged, jaw tight like it was wired shut. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I could do that in front of her colleagues. No, her first words were, "You humiliated me." I didn't laugh. I didn't blink. I just said, "Not as badly as you humiliated me for the past 6 months in my own house." That stopped her. She opened her mouth like she wanted to scream something, but nothing came out. Instead, she walked to the bedroom and slammed the door hard enough to shake a photo off the hallway wall. A photo of us from 3 years ago, when I still believed we were unbreakable. The crash echoed through the apartment. I picked up the frame, looked at our fake happiness for a second, then slid it into the trash without a word. For 3 days, we didn't speak. She tiptoed around like a ghost, leaving early, coming back late, pretending the silence was temporary. But it wasn't. Something had shifted. And not just between us. Her world was cracking in places she didn't expect. On day 4, I got an email from one of her coworkers. It was brief. Just a subject line, "You should know." Inside was a forwarded message from the company's HR. Apparently, Declan had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Code of conduct breach, it said. Nothing more. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The fire had started. And Darla, for once, was standing in the smoke alone. It's been 6 weeks since the night everything changed. Darla moved out 10 days after the HR email. She didn't slam doors this time. No yelling. No dramatics. Just a quiet Wednesday afternoon, a rental van, and a few awkward glances as she loaded boxes into the back. She tried to say something before she left, probably to soften the damage, maybe to rewrite the story in her favor, but I raised my hand gently and said, "Let's not ruin the silence." She nodded, and just like that, the door clicked shut. I half expected to feel hollow after she left, but I didn't. I felt calm, not happy, not triumphant, but calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. I no longer had to shrink myself to make someone else look bigger. I didn't have to pretend her sarcasm was playful or her distance was just stress from work. I stopped walking on eggshells in my own home. The man who used to sit quietly while being dismissed at her events? He's gone. I didn't reinvent myself overnight, but every morning since she left, I've started with one small act of reclaiming. I painted the office. I unfollowed the people who only knew me as Darla's husband. I bought myself a secondhand keyboard, something I hadn't played since college, and the other night, I played a full song without making a mistake. No one clapped. No one needed to. That moment was for me. And funny enough, just this morning, I got a message from Declan's ex. We've been talking here and there. Nothing serious. But she said something that stuck with me. It's wild how someone else's lies can bring two honest people together. She might be right. The betrayal was brutal. But what came after? That's mine to shape. And I plan to fill it with people who don't make me feel like I need to shrink to be accepted. So, if you've ever felt invisible at someone else's table, trust me, you don't have to stay seated. Thanks for listening. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's a historical event where someone quietly turned the tables and changed everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts.